But then we're stumbling out and we're like, oh yeah, we have to call an Uber. And then JJ, as though descended from the heavens and light around him was like, I can drive you guys. I'm sober.
I realized, I think this is our first show together.
I think so too.
Like it might be. So I have to ask you this too. A couple years ago, I talked about this with D-Bro when he came on Perspectives.
Yeah.
A couple years ago, there was the infamous Kia Telluride, which is the car that I have, where I packed a bunch of fantasy analysts in the SUV to go to the bar. I was sober. Other people were not. I believe you were one of the folks that were in the back of the car, right?
It's one of the greatest car rides that I've ever had in my life. And just to set it up for people, we were at the what is it? The thing in Canton, what's it called? The Expo, the Fantasy Football Expo. And it was like the day where it was the stadium party, but it was like raining. And so they have it's like the Hall of Fame stadium where they have like the Hall of Fame game or whatever. So we were in the concourse because you couldn't go on the field. It's pouring, whatever. And they were selling drinks there. So it's like, everyone, all the fantasy analysts that y'all see on Twitter, they were all there, whatever. And then people were getting kind of toasty, sure. After the end of the couple hours. We'd all been drinking in the hotel lobby, like prior to going over there. But then we're stumbling out and we're like, oh yeah, we have to call an Uber. And then JJ, as though descended from the heavens and light around him was like, I can drive you guys. I'm sober and I have a minivan. And so it was like, how many of us? What JJ was like?
Oh, at least like 10 or 11 in there.
It was a clown car, and JJ was like, no one throw up in here. And
that's all I cared about. And then I had Daigle in the back, just constantly just destroying me and the fact that the car was messy. Meanwhile, my family had driven up to Pittsburgh. A couple days prior, because we were going to be in Pittsburgh then for the week for my sister-in-law's wedding. And so I had 2 kids in the car, and of course it's going to be I had no intention of having 10 smelly fantasy analysts, drunken smelly fantasy analysts in my car to drive them to the bar. I had no intention that was going to happen.
There's a lot of podcast concepts that have been done, but if you had just had a camera in there, oh my gosh, the clicks for those 20-25 minutes, we got to have, it's not taxi cab confessionals, but we could have fantasy confessionals and some concept like that. But it was an incredible time, and it's good to be with you, brother.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you too. I again, like, I can't believe this is, I think, our first show that we've done together. So I'm really, really excited to sort of dig into your process and dig into how you look at this stuff, because you've been around these prospecting streets for a while now. We've randomly like come across each other on Twitter and stuff like that, and have DM'd and whatnot. But I really want to dig into this class because I think it's an interesting one. So my first question that I ask everyone that comes on the show, I haven't had any repeat Perspectives guests either, so I probably wouldn't ask this again to you if you were to come on again, but just let everyone know sort of how you got into the space in the first place and sort of how you found this calling of prospecting and doing this evaluation.
Yeah, well, I've been obsessed with the NFL draft since I was a kid. And like when the internet came out and then you could like print stuff off the internet, the thing I would do at the very end of every NFL draft was I would print out the 7 rounds. I don't think I had a concept that they were like stored on the internet, the results of the draft. So in my childhood closet, I had this stack of just literally the printed off results. And then you get the draft magazines, it's like spring break was when I would always in my head, because then you'd be down at the Minneapolis airport and they go in the, what's it called? The bookstores that only Hudson. You never see a Hudson outside of an airport.
Do they exist outside of an airport?
I want to own the first Hudson outside of an airport and just have, there's that one Blockbuster in Bend, Oregon. And it's like the last Blockbuster on earth. I want to be the first Hudson outside of an airport. I feel like people would go there. But anyway, like that, that's where we go on vacation for spring break. And I'd be like, my thing that I look forward to was being at the airport, because then they'd have the NFL draft magazines. I wanted the long big board at the end, as long as I could get it so I could cross off names like as it went. You'd have the scroll at the bottom with best available, but it never went fast enough for me. They'd be doing other nonsense. I'd be like, put the best available back on. So, like that's what I always, and then I wanted to do that, of course. The second I realized you're not going to be playing in the NFL, it's like, well, let's just cover the NFL draft. And so that's, I actually quit football going into my senior year of high school because I got an opportunity to work at the local newspaper newspaper after school. And I was the editor of the school newspaper as well. I wanted to go to a big school. So, people would read my stories outside of campus. That's why I went to University of Kansas for undergrad. And I got into a graduate writing school after that because the journalism industry was tanking. But fortunately, I got a part-time job at NBC at the same time writing about baseball, which wasn't, my first love, but that's okay. And I did that through grad school. I did it for a year when I was teaching in China after graduate school. I could do it remotely, writing up the West Coast baseball games, a shift nobody else wanted because the clock was flipped. So midnight central was noon in Chongqing, China, where I was. And then when I got back into town, I told my boss at the time, I need more hours or I'm going to have to look somewhere else because I'm out of college now. I got to pay rent and whatnot. And he said, would you be interested in NFL draft college football? We're trying to build up our section there. And it was that's what I've always wanted to do. And so then after that, that was the thing where it never felt like work. So I just kind of went ham on it. And a couple of years later, I was the top of the section or whatever. And we've been doing it ever since. And I love doing it.
What was the time frame when you came back from China and you were kind of looking to do more?
That would have been, at this point, man, I'm dating myself, 11 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, I really feel old whenever I some of the guests that I'll have on, they're in their early 20s. And I'm like, man, it definitely ages me. It makes me feel really old.
For sure. Yeah. And now we get the players, or we get the sons of players, the juniors it's like, man, I'm getting real old. Pretty soon I'm going to be, in Mel Kiper, when he's talking to someone and then he's like, I evaluated your father. And, and it's like, I used to laugh at that. And it's like, oh no, that's going to be me in a couple of years.
100%. Yeah. The weird thing is I remember in Madden when Madden, cause I like almost everyone listening to this probably played franchise mode in Madden. You would just kind of manage your team and you'd simulate games, do all that kind of stuff. But I remember in Madden when they came out with the idea that you can hire coaches who were former players that had retired, right? So if they retired in this is probably 2005-ish, around that time frame. I remember getting older players, watching them retire, and then a couple years later I would hire them on to be my head coach because it was just really fun to do that, right? And it's literally happening in real life. That is what, and you don't really realize it growing up watching football and stuff. You're like, oh, this coach in the 90s actually played football in the 70s or whenever it was. I grew up a Steelers fan and Bill Cowher was a football player. It wasn't just he came from, he's just but we are seeing that happening. And I think the big one for me was probably D'Amico Ryans, where I'm this guy is I remember him coming up and this is not just a, random dude who, I didn't see his career trajectory. We saw it all. And then now he's a head coach and he's a young looking head coach. And it's just wild, man.
For sure. Yeah. Or Kevin O'Connell, the coach about
Kevin O'Connell's a great example.
A mile away from me. I remember watching him when he was at San Diego State. I remember, him in the draft. That was a little bit before my time. So I didn't have crazy ardent opinions about him, but and then you remember his career, and it's just kind of wild. I guess we're at the age now where we see the full lifespan of people's football lives.
Yeah. I'm just prepared for someone from the Zap model to be a head coach. It's going to be very, very strange.
For sure.
So speaking of evaluation process, so obviously I bring up the Zap model. I like to look at a lot of this stuff analytically, but as I say on this show and on every show, I'm still watching these guys. It's very, very important to do so, and for me to not sound like a moron whenever I'm talking about these players. I think it'd be disingenuous to only speak on what their spreadsheet numbers are saying. But I'm curious, what's your evaluation process like? And I ask this not because there's a right or wrong answer. I'm just curious. How much weight do you put analytics into that process and into your evaluation? Does it matter to you, or are you more so just I got film grades, I'm watching these guys, that's all I care about?
Definitely analytics too, for sure. Mine's probably, it's a table with legs. It's the first leg of it, I would consider context, which is I cover college football in the fall. So all these guys, I don't do as much with recruiting, but like when they get onto campus, and then their careers. So I have the context of in the moment and sort of their progression through there and things that they're working on in their games and big spots and all these different things. And then so that's the first one. And then they get into the process. At that point, their college career is over. So you get, that's when you get access to their full, at least statistical, analytical profile. And then you get their athletic profile as well during the pre-draft process and their exact measurements. As the schools can do some exaggeration with those. You get accuracy on that. So yeah, all that information and what the analytics say about that. And then the other thing in the spring is going through the cut-ups, right? You watch the guys live, but especially things like trenches, defenses, the ability to get the all 22 with the quarterbacks, obviously the broadcasting view, you can't tell what they are seeing when they make their decision. So, I like doing that or seeing the receivers' routes, which you don't get to do on the broadcast either. So it's just sort of adding all of that context in. And once you feel like you have a full picture, then you start comparing them apples to apples with other people. And then, as in the springs as well, you're picking up information from other folks, whether it's at the Senior Bowl, whether it's at the Combine, talking to people, getting more information. To me, it's just an information game, right? And the more complete picture, it's like a Polaroid or something, and you got to keep shaking it and it gets, clearer and clearer. And the clearer your picture is, that's the more accurate your rankings are going to be. So that's why I don't understand when, either it's a film guy that's like, nope, that's what I saw in film, and I don't care what the analytics are, the stats are, or whatever, or the opposite, of just, the numbers are what they are, and I don't really care to see. In my opinion, like for the most accurate, you have to consider all of it and take in as much information as you can.
Yeah, so this isn't something that I threw on our show sheet, but I am curious. And, I don't think that there's like a right or wrong answer. I'm just extremely curious about how you approach this. But, for me, I care a lot less about how I view a player concretely before the draft. And I'm not sitting here trying to project the draft, right? Like, I'm not trying... I don't know. Like, I generally have an idea of like where Ashton Jeanty might get drafted, right? Like I generally know where, I know where team needs are and stuff because I know the game of football, but like, that's not the thing that I'm working on the most. And that's not the thing that I'm focused on the most is like projecting the draft, doing mock drafts and stuff like that. From your perspective, do you care just as deeply about sort of your evaluation pre-draft and your landing spot predictions pre-draft as you would post-draft, or do you still care more about just the post-draft? Because like for me, I only care about the post-drafts, or I don't only, but I mostly care about the post-draft stuff because that's the thing that we're acting on from a fantasy perspective, right? Like that's the thing that matters there. But your job and your approach to this is probably a little bit different.
Yeah, I mean, like in terms of that, it's just like sort of the bedrock foundation that you come into the process with, and you probably see it as a band of outcomes, right? The baby's wider at the beginning, and then you start to shrink down as we go throughout the process. But yeah, I mean, like that's all it is. It's just my foundation coming in. But yeah, like. Based on new things I learn, based on watching the cut-ups, based on what I see with the analytics and what the oceanit data has suggested about certain metrics over the past 25, 30 years, between all that different stuff, it's going to move on guys a little bit, but that sort of bedrock foundation that I come in with, it's sort of like the rope that keeps me tethered to earth. Like you're not going to get me like one dude runs like a 4.2 and all of a sudden it's like, okay, everything I knew about that player is thrown out, and you know what I mean? Like, so that's what I use it more for. And then like the post-draft stuff, like that's important with the, as far as the projecting the initial success and of course for fantasy players as well, that we can have a, more or less accurate picture of a player, but if he gets into a bad situation or he gets into a situation where there isn't an opportunity, things, football, it's not like baseball, where baseball, it's an individual sport masquerading as a team sport. In football, you need the other factors and everything is sort of spooled together. So yeah, the landing spot becomes very important for their, especially initial success in the NFL.
Yeah, and I think it's fine to like there's some people who are like, oh, I don't care about landing spot because the player is the player. And we know that talent, will generally lead to more volume and all of that kind of stuff. It's just a general trend and idea. But like, I always think back to like Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? St. Brown, obviously a good player. obviously one of the better wide receivers in the league. But I think that it's like we should be questioning like how long it would have taken him to do what he did if he didn't land on a depth chart that was completely open for him to do what he does, you know? And it's not to say that he would never emerge. It's just to say that like the process in which this happened might have gone slower than it actually did. Maybe that second half of his rookie season wouldn't have happened, which is what I think you're kind of speaking to, is just this idea that, these guys and where they land, and, the draft capital aspect of it too. And teams and the sunk cost, the cost, and then turns into a potential sunk cost that they'd be taking on. That obviously can lead to volume opportunities as well.
That's it. Yeah. And the system that you're in and all that different stuff. Yeah. It can make you look a little bit better. It can lead to no opportunity. So yeah, I mean, and that's something that we can't predict in advance, like with my job, I'm talking about adding context as far as individual evaluation, but there's also context that makes it, a job like mine a little bit more problematic. For instance, I do a 500 player big board every spring with 500 player comps. Well, if you're an NFL general manager who is laying out a big board, you have an offense and a defense, you have coaches, and then you have holes, right? Like the free agency has already happened. You have schemes that they run. So they're bringing you like, hey, I need a slot receiver for the future, right? Or I need immediate help at interior defensive line, or we're going to get ripped up all season on the ground. Or they're giving them specifics within, this paradigm of the holes that they're trying to fill to put together a roster. Whereas we're doing these rankings in a vacuum, right? And so like you have to sort of, cross that bridge on your own, as far as that goes. And then, after the thing's done, those guys, they go into situations. Some find their destiny as far as the scheme and the opportunity. Some dudes never do. Right. And so that's just another part of it. But at that point, it's out of your hands. I mean, you just have to hit the ball where, you submit your final board and then just see where it lies after the fact.
Yeah, 100%. You kind of brought up the NFL Combine a little bit with your pre-draft process and evaluation stuff. How much do you care about the Combine?
I care about it, it's not certainly be all end all, but the testing metrics I appreciate. Especially because they populate all my sheets and then give me all my, my equations and all this different stuff. So I definitely appreciate that, the accurate measurements for the guys we haven't got it yet. It seemed like we had some accurate, some measurement things, this process, which I don't really understand. But anyway, getting that objective data, I appreciate. And then I also appreciate that there's so much of the NFL there, and there's opportunities to learn stuff. I love the podium sessions too. Just learning stuff about the kids, getting a feel for them. We don't have an opportunity in the media to get them in one-on-one, for 20, 30 minutes like the NFL teams do. But you can get a little sense of them listening to their podium session. So it's just sort of the adding of the information. And what I'm doing is cross-checking that, again, I come in with the foundation on these players, and it's like basically cross-checking their results against essentially what my expectation was, that initial sort of where I viewed them. And then that's where, you can have some changes, but that's how I see it. Not be all end all, but there's importance to it.
Yeah, look, and I always tell people, I don't put much from because I'm prospecting running back, wide receiver, and tight end mostly. And I'm not putting that much stock in the actual metrics I get at wide receiver, let's say. That doesn't get inputted into my model, but I would assume, and I know, I shouldn't say I would assume, I know that a lot of that ends up getting captured in draft capital, which is an input in the model, right? But I will also say that if I were not using draft capital and I were doing more of the job that you are doing, I would be looking at the Combine completely differently, because I think that the athleticism stuff, even at a position like wide receiver, if that's going to project draft capital to some degree, then, and I would be hypothetically trying to project draft capital on my own, then I would then be using that athletic testing for wide receivers and all these other positions a little bit more than I currently do. So it's good to get that perspective from someone who, is doing more of the pre-draft stuff, than the post-draft or versus, weighing the two.
For sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, for sure. And then the other thing is we know that there's, overall, I think that the idea of threshold, it's a little bit silly, the threat, the bulky guy, Trent Baalke from the Jaguars, he took Trevon Walker over Aiden Hutchinson because he had a couple more inches on his arms, stuff like that. I think is a little bit silly, but there are athletic thresholds and some size measurement thresholds where it becomes nullifying if you are beneath them. Like we know, so you're able to sort of cross off some of those guys that just don't have the juice for the NFL. And then, it helps to just clear your, zone in a little bit more on what is that guy actually.
So while you're I know that you're evaluating every position, but when it comes to the positions in fantasy football, right? Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end. How would you kind of rank them in terms of easiest to hardest in terms of how hard they are to evaluate?
I think running back, I would put on the easier on those. Quarterback is tricky. It's always the one where you feel the most conviction, and then you're either the most right or the most wrong. Yeah. So it's and you were mentioning you don't have the QBs in the Zap model. Dwayne doesn't have them in his super model, because with quarterbacks, the data, it's really hard to get at what actually is pointing you at stuff. You really cannot unspool them from the teammates they had in the system that they were playing under in college. Receivers, I feel I probably put them on I probably put running back and receiver as if I had to put two at the top for that I easiest, I guess.
Easier than the other ones.
Yeah, and then tight end, quarterback would be the bottom one. Tight end, I'd probably put. Actually, tight end I might put fourth. There's a lot of factors with it. But yeah, that's probably how I do it.
Yeah, tight end is difficult. I have a tight end model. I don't feel as confident in it as I do the running back and wide receiver one. And part of that is, at least with running back and wide receiver, again, if draft capital is a major input, which I'm just trying to win fantasy football, so of course I'm going to use draft capital as an input. But draft capital being an input at tight end is just different because tight ends are offensive line extensions. And so you don't from a team perspective, projecting the use and usage of a tight end is a lot more difficult, in my opinion, than doing so with wide receivers, or of course running backs too. But wide receivers is okay, what they're trying to accomplish, right? Now they might be lined up in different areas, and there are different wide receivers, if you will. There's smaller slot guys, there's big X's. Whereas when you're looking at tight end, they could be drafting some beastly athletic tight end who's got a great catch radius and has really good yards per route run numbers, but then all of a sudden they just want to use him in line as an additional blocker all the time, right? So that's one of the harder things that I've found, at least with the position.
Yeah, and that's why it's one of the known as one of the more slowly developing positions, because you come in, you're not as physically mature as you will ultimately become, and yet you exist in this area between the offensive line and the skills, right? And you have to do stuff on both ends of that polarity. So now you're up against these war daddy 27-year-olds that have, it's I need, feed my family, and stuff like this. And they're coming out. And then, you have that stuff. You have the shifting, some teams pull their tight ends. The second level on these concepts, you're chipping on this route, you're not, all this different stuff that you have to learn as well. So between those two things and then becoming ingratiated in the system where your other teammates trust you, it takes a little bit longer than with some other positions.
Yeah, 100%. All right, let's get into some players, because I know that folks want it. I want it too. I want to hear where you're at with some of these guys. Let's start with Ashton Jeanty, RB1 for most folks. I think he's your RB1 as well. But my question to you is there anyone that is close to Jeanty? And then sort of taking a step back, do you agree that this running back class in totality, it looks to be special?
To the second one, for sure. Yeah. And to the first one, nobody close to Jeanty.
Yeah.
Nobody's close to Jeanty. He is a different thing, and he's in his own league, not just with this class. You go back a bit. In my opinion, he is the best running back prospect to enter the NFL since Saquon. I know other people might say Bijan. I think Jeanty's a little bit better than Bijan. But him, guys like Hampton, the Ohio State kids, Caleb Johnson. I like those guys. But we got a golf. Jeanty is a different thing.
Have you had a hard time finding comps for him?
Well, I kind of like mine.
Let's hear it.
LaDainian Tomlinson.
Okay. Oh, that is fun. That's a fun one. Yeah. The hard part for me is that I'm doing it all statistically, and my model goes back to 2011, and there hasn't been, again, you talking about LT is a great example, because other people will bring up like Maurice Jones-Drew, right? That's another, often just from a size perspective and like an impact perspective. But to me, it's like the fact that you have to go that far back to find a reasonable comp for Jeanty speaks volumes to the kind of prospect that he is. No,
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a guy who has some, like, in terms of contact balance at the end of his career, I'll be interested if people are making the argument, like, and we'll see, but he has the best contact balance I ever seen in college. Yeah. It's impossible to tackle that guy with one person. He ain't going down, right? Like, he's staying on his feet. It's, my comp for him is the spinning top at the end of Inception. Can't knock it down. It's just going to keep going. So yeah,
spoiler alert.
Yeah, I mean, you have that. The strength that he runs with. Wow, once he gets going, the vision, the toggling of the tempos, like all that different stuff. But then he also, and for people that are like new to him, or on Twitter, we get a lot of true box score scouts where they're just literally looking at the box. They'll probably think, he ain't a good receiver, because last year his receiving stats were down. He's a freaking tremendous receiver.
Yeah.
The year before 2023 is up there, past decade in terms of receiving seasons we've had from a running back. And it was over 10% of the snaps that year that he took either in the slot or the boundary. And his, for people out there that might think that was a fluke, and the numbers that he put up, his PFF grade that year receiving was over 90. And in addition to that, I don't know, if people realize this, as a junior in high school, this is in Frisco, Texas, Ashton Jeanty took over for Marvin Mims Jr. as that team's slot receiver after Marvin Mims Jr. had signed with Oklahoma. And because also that Frisco high school team, they're starting running back the next season, or in that off season after his senior year, he signed with Oklahoma State. So they had a D1 running back. So Jeanty, he was the starter at slot receiver. That team was awesome. They were in Texas's high school, the highest level of it, and he was all district or all whatever that high level was, or whatever. He got all the accommodations. The senior year, he shifts back to running back and goes absolutely ballistic. But between that and then between the fact that Jeanty was living in Italy up until his freshman year of high school, that's on a naval base. That's why recruiters were late on him, right? Boise State was, obviously they got in early, and Boise State also had developed the previous stud running back that had come out of Frisco, Texas, Mr. Jay Ajayi. So that's why when Jeanty starts going ballistic his senior season, now the Power 5 at the time, but Power 4 schools start to go in on him. Jeanty's like, yeah, I'm good. We're going to Boise. They believed in me first, and they developed Jay and that sort of stuff. But yeah, I mean, fabulous receiver in high school, fabulous receiver when used at that, including out in the slot. He could even put it in the boundary a little bit when we've seen that at Boise State. This past season, the numbers were down. They funneled all of his usage into running because they wanted him to make a run at Barry Sanders's all-time FBS record, and he came very close. But that was a part of the pitch for Boise State to retain Ashton Jeanty for his true junior season, which we're never going to see again. We will never see a singular offensive superstar skill player at the G5 level that remains there his entire career. Right. And SEC schools, Big Ten schools, they tried really hard to make sure that wouldn't be the case with Jeanty. But Boise State, they were able to figure out, get close enough with the NILs. It certainly was not the top. They were topped by a lot of different people. But one of the things was, we're going to make a run at that Heisman. We're going to make a run at Barry Sanders.
Yeah. I mean, look, not only that, but like you noted, in 2023, his receiving numbers were great. Like he had like a 23% reception share in that offense that year, which is like a top 10 number, maybe top 5 within the database. Yeah, I mean, I don't see a problem at all with the receiving profile. The only thing I do want to ask is, do you worry at all? And the answer is going to be no, I don't worry. But I'm just curious about like your general evaluation here about strength of schedule, strength of opponent, the fact that he played at Boise State. Does that concern you at all? Not just for Jeanty, but just any other player. Like for instance, we have Marcus Yarns, let's say, right? So he goes out, he plays at Delaware, who I thought was Marcus Yams when I was first evaluating because the R in the end looked like an M, on a computer. But like a guy like Yarns, right? Like might look the part at Delaware, let's say, but obviously a player who is NFL caliber, a running back who's NFL caliber, playing at a place like Delaware is going to have an easier time breaking tackles and doing cool things on a football field. Now, obviously, Boise State bigger than a place like Delaware, but how do you sort of like evaluate those players within that context?
Yeah, with it certainly you have to consider it, right? And when you're watching the film, the cut-ups of those guys, that's why I want to watch the games where they're against legitimate competition.
Yeah.
I don't care about your game against the FCS team in the week one, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're playing at a P4 school, whatever. With Jeanty, he shredded every opponent that he played, including being the marked man against some nasty defenses. So that's where it jives it for me. Just from this past season, September 7th, they played in Eugene, Oregon against the Ducks, the only team last year to finish the regular season undefeated in the Power Four. Boise State came as close to giving them that loss as anybody did. And it was just because of Jeanty. 25 carries, 192 yards, 3 touchdowns. He had two catches as well for 8 yards. So 200 all-purpose yards for him in that game. And again, he was a marked man. That was the mandate of the Oregon. Do not let that kid beat us. And he almost did anyway. And then the last game in the playoff against Penn State, that Penn State team, nasty defense.
Yeah.
We talk about Abdul Carter a lot, but they have dudes everywhere. And it was all loaded up. We don't get beat by Ashton Jeanty today. It was admirable. I mean, the 30 carries, he got 3 more catches, 104 yards rushing. I think he was the only guy to get above 100 against Penn State last year. I don't have that in front of me, so don't hold me to that. Yeah. But Penn State had just a nasty front seven, nasty run defense. There was the one play, and you think, someone out there might be like, 30 carries for 104 yards. That's not that much. But every single time, right, loaded boxes with NFL defenders.
Yeah, and he's playing with an offensive line that's not this like SEC offensive line too that people have to give context.
Correct. Yeah. So it was that was a John Wick scenario where it's like Ashton Jeanty against the world, right? It's like at the end when they put the alarm on and then everyone has a contract on John Wick and is coming at. That was Ashton Jeanty in a couple of those games against those awesome defenses. There was the one run against Penn State where he broke either 6 or 7 tackle attempts on one run. And he got like 8 yards on it, like because he just got to throw people off him, like this different stuff, and like that's what it was in that game. But no, I'm not concerned about him. The Yarns one is interesting, and situations like that. Yarns super duper undersized running back, and he's just a bullet. It's just speed. He's a straight line dude too. So his evaluation, you think about against the FCS, the context matters, of course, and then you have to project it going forward. Can a guy that small, he's at running back? I know the fabulous receiver, right? Like the fun stuff about his tape when they shift him out to the boundary and or the slot, Marcus Yarns, and he looks like a wide receiver. Right, what he looks like is Tutu Atwell when he's out there. Right, but he runs really good routes, and then contextually, that's when I want to see that kid at the Senior Bowl. That's why I love that Yarns was there this year, because I'd watched his tape and I was like, this is interesting, and I wrote in my Senior Bowl preview that I believe that you were going to get 2 developmental bullets with Marcus Yarns, because if he fails as the runner, the between the tackle stuff and the meat and potato stuff, he's got to make it on outside, concepts, right? But more to the point, receiving. This is essentially a pure receiving guy, but great at it. And my thing was, if he fails as your receiving back, or you, for whatever reason, you don't like that I thought you potentially have another developmental bullet of trying to turn him into Tutu Atwell. It's a very similar build. I think he's just as skilled as a receiver there. And Tutu, I remember that kid at Louisville. He ran 2 routes. One of them was the quarterback immediately turned to the left when the dude was playing off him and just chucked him the ball real quick. And then it's like, Tutu, you're fast, run. The other one was straight go route.
Sure.
Occasionally he did a slant, but that's we'll say 3. But like with Yarns, you could get used to like that because the speed plays all day. But the competition you have to consider. It's another data point. You have to consider it.
Yeah. For sure. So speaking of receiving work at the running back position, a question that's popped up recently for me is about Quinshon Judkins, because my ZAP model, or the ZAP model, I don't want to say my ZAP model. That sounds pretentious.
I'm going to say your ZAP model. You don't have to say I'll say it.
There you go. The ZAP model no longer uses rushing metrics in the running back model, which sounds wild, sounds stupid, and sounds crazy. But a lot of that is just because it's captured in some of the other things that it goes into the model, whether it's running back size, right? So obviously bigger running backs are probably going to see more of that workload, draft capital being a big one. And honestly, I think it just comes down to the fact that receiving work is not captured enough by NFL teams, as we care about it more in fantasy football than NFL teams do, because it matters that much. Not that NFL teams don't care about it, but it just matters that much from like a PPR standpoint in fantasy football. So people have asked me then about Quinshon Judkins, because Judkins obviously splits a backfield with Travion Henderson. He split backfields to a degree. I mean, he had other competition, I should say, at Ole Miss. And so my question to you is, do you see him being a 3-down back in the NFL? My standpoint, like what the model is saying and sort of what I've seen and what I've looked at, is that I think from like a workload standpoint, in terms of like what he might be able to handle, would look more like a Jonathan Taylor as opposed to a Bijan Robinson, right? Is that sort of what you're seeing as well? Just for, not stylistically, but from like a workload perspective.
1,000%. Yeah. I don't want him out there on the passing downs, and I don't like. Why do you have to? The thing that Ohio State did last year, that's how I want him used in the NFL. He's going to be my bell cow in terms of the offense that you go into, in terms of the carries. He's going to suck up all of them. Right, like I mean, Judkins, he played in hurry-up offense, especially at Ole Miss prior to when he went to Ohio State. But Chip Kelly, he ain't running quite as fast as he used to in terms of the tempo. But like we seen that Ole Miss offense that he was in the first 2 years, it'd be like hand it off to Quinshon, 6-yard gain, they'd sprint back to the line, hand it off to Quinshon, 5-yard gain, move the sticks, sprint back to the line, it was like that sort of thing. And then like on the passing downs, they would bring someone else in. I love the way Judkins runs. He's very, very natural with it. He proved the athleticism, right? Like, and the thing that he's the best at athletically, it's the acceleration. But he has tremendous vision. You talk to any of the coaches who have ever coached him, they will fawn over his vision. Vision feel, right? Like that stuff is just really, really good with him. Love him as the pure runner. But to your point, Jonathan Taylor at Wisconsin, during his draft class, he would get nitpicked about the receiving thing, but there wasn't a ton of context added in that those Wisconsin teams, Taylor, right from the start, first down, the play was always hand the ball to Jonathan Taylor. Second down, the play was always hand the ball to Jonathan Taylor. If it was a first down again, you revert to the hand it off to Jonathan Taylor. When you got into the third downs, the obvious passing, he had to come off the field. You're not giving him the ball every single friggin' time, especially when it's like 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9. And that's okay. He also wasn't the best probably receiving back on that team, right? Like, and you just don't develop certain things. But yeah, Judkins, as far as a pass blocker, Travion's way better pass blocker than he is. Yeah. And Judkins as a receiver, it's just kind of meh. But that's okay. The guy's an awesome runner. And on his, when you're considering drafting him, you just know, we just have to have a solid receiving down pack, but that's it. Once we do, we got our transformer of a backfield committee, and it's going to be really, really good.
Let me ask you this: do you think that this is an improper way of viewing pass catching at running back? Because this is how I generally view it. I think there's almost like, and this is kind of dumbed down, but I'm dumbing it down because I think that it almost can be. It's almost like there's 3 tiers or categories to pass catchers. And they're either elite and like really good and obviously good. And what I mean by that is we saw them move around the line in college. We saw them be able to play out of the slot, et cetera, and run wide receiver routes and be, Christian McCaffrey's of the world. Like, he was going to be a high volume receiver at the NFL level. That wasn't necessarily the biggest question mark. The bigger question mark was just size and how much of a workload he'd be able to see, whatever. And then there's a bottom group, the bottom category or grouping are the players who are just horrific at doing that thing. Like, there is a very clear red flag that this guy is not going to be much of a pass catcher at the next level. Maybe it's simply due to what the analytics are saying, that he had like a 3% reception share in his best season, and it's very obvious that that's just not going to translate. Or you just see something on film where he wasn't seeing that much complexity to how he was running his routes. But then there's this middle tier where the majority of running backs kind of land in, where like, for instance, Kenneth Walker coming out, right? He had analytically had some marks where we were like, okay, how much of a high volume receiver is he going to be at the NFL level? And we haven't really seen him be a high volume receiver at the NFL level, but it doesn't mean that he cannot be a decent receiver, right? I kind of feel that way about Quinshon Judkins, and it's being misconstrued a little bit as Judkins being a bad receiver. I just don't think he's part of that elite group. And I think that the majority of running backs that we see come out are not part of that elite group. Is that too simple of a way to look at it? Or do you think it's fair when you're trying to project how these guys are going to be used at the NFL level?
No, the way that I would phrase, but the way I see it is similar. But the way I think about it is like the top tier, it's the guys who can create without the ball and after and with the ball, right?
Yeah,
so those are, for instance, in this class, Brashard Smith or Marcus Yarns, we were just talking about. It's to your point, they can run the routes like a receiver. They can be deployed as a receiver or out of the backfield. You get legitimate downfield routes out of them where you can trust them to create their own opportunity without the ball. That's your top tier. And then your middle tier is the guys who can only create with the ball, right? So you need to manufacture their touches
and stuff,
but then they can be a problem with the ball in their hands. They ain't going to do anything creative for you. They're very, on the route, they're very rarely going to be sent out on a route that is beyond the line of scrimmage, but they can do damage with the ball in their hands. And that group in this, it would be like Omarion Hampton. It would be Caleb Johnson. Those guys, they don't run routes downfield. They ain't making anyone miss out, in the open field and the, whatever. It's you get the swings, screens, dump offs.
Yep.
Right. The dump off, that's just circumstantial. But the other two, the idea, get them the ball with some space around them and an envoy in front of them. Right. That they're going to be a problem. Right. It's more or less you're moving the line of scrimmage somewhere else and you're thinning out the bodies that are in it. It's essentially just a modified running concept, but like that's the middle tier. And then there's the guys that just do not have feel for it. But that middle tier, to your point, I think there's more people in it than is commonly believed. You brought up Walker. That's a good example. One that I always point to is Leonard Fournette, who did did zero as a receiver at LSU, but it was, similar to the Jonathan Taylor thing.
Right.
Every year that Leonard Fournette played in the NFL, where it was either 14 or 15 plus games. I think he had 3 or 4 of those seasons. Every single one of them, he had some over 60 catches. Right. Like, and again, it's not because he's out there, Christian McCaffrey. And it's just you do the swing thing, the screen thing, and the dump off thing, and that he'll do some stuff after the catch.
Yeah, 100%. Talk to me about Bhayshul Tuten. So he looked good in my model pre-combine, and then the combine happens, and obviously, he's been shooting up draft boards. Right whenever I published the pre-draft version of the prospect guide, he was around 100 projected draft capital, so like a fringe day 2 guy. What do you see in him, and do you think it's possible that he does go day 2 in this class?
For sure. Yeah. He's in play for round 3. And if he don't go in round 3, kid, you ain't going to have to wait around long to hear your name called on Saturday. It's going to be one of those situations, but obviously you have the incredible athleticism with him. And that, has been apparent since he was at the FCS level. And we've seen that it played on the field in the Power 4 at Virginia Tech. He's very fun to watch because he has this breakneck style where sometimes he gets the ball and it's like, what can happen next? It's one of those hold your breath kind of a guys, and he can hit a dinger at any moment. Yeah. But it's sort of, you get the peaks and valleys with him, right? Like and the valleys, unfortunately, he has ball security issues. And then sometimes you can quibble a bit with the running pass he takes or the vision thing. Like sometimes you want him to work on refining that. So some of the decision, is a little bit better, but he's a wild man out there. Right. Yeah. Like, and you get that sort of kinetic energy, right? Like where he get the ball in the stadium, everyone is holding their breath. I stole my comp from him because I seen one from Lance Zierlein and I was like, that's it. I couldn't find it on my own, but it was right in front of my face. He is Isaiah Pacheco.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I can definitely see that. The one that spit out in the model. Actually, I'm curious to hear your response to this. because I was kind of surprised by it, but I can see it if draft capital is favorable for him, right? At the end of the day, if he is a day 2 guy, but it was Kenneth Walker, bringing up Walker again. That was the one who I think Walker was a more obviously a more prolific runner and has a little bit more on that better vision than Tuten does, but size wise, speed wise, that home run hitting ability, that sort of like, I mean, if we're being honest, Walker's had some of that inconsistency even in the NFL where he's been sort of a lower success rate guy, but high EPA guy because he can break those big plays. So that to me was like the pie in the sky type comp for him, but that was the one that spit out for him.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought about that one before, but there are things about it that do make some sense there. The struggles with or not being deployed as much as a receiver in college. However you want to look at that. And then the frame with the athletic profile. Kenneth Walker tested better than I thought he was. So then you sort of get that. The only thing, the running style, styles are a bit different. Now that's right. You mentioned the vision in the field that Walker has, and he was so good with the cuts and creating the space and setting up second level defenders and these sorts of things. Whereas with Tuten, it's you pull the trigger on a gun. That thing is flying out there, and then we'll see what happens.
Which is Pacheco, which is exactly what we get from Pacheco.
That's exactly right. So that's it. But there are similarities there, in terms of the profiles. Yeah,
for sure. Okay, if you're looking at the consensus right now and looking at how they're talking about this class, looking at running backs, which running back, maybe 2, however many you want to talk about, do you see as being immensely undervalued right now?
I would say amongst the top guys, the top grouping, I would say Caleb Johnson. The middle grouping, I would say. Actually, I got a lot of them because I'm higher, I think, on Devin Neal than most folks. I think I'm higher on DJ Giddens. I know that I'm higher on RJ Harvey, and I also think I'm higher on Damian Martinez. So I guess that would be there. And then in the sort of the day 3 flyer zone, I already talked about him. Marcus Yarns, I would put in there. Marcus Yarn going to hang around. I mean, the receiving skill with that speed, it's going to play. It's going to be as a complimentary guy, but it's going to play. Another one in that grouping that I like is and this is, some of these other guys, it's flash. This guy doesn't have any flash at all. And I think that's why he doesn't get discussed as much. I think he's going to provide a value for a team during the draft is Taj Brooks from Texas Tech. Mm-hmm. All-time bowling ball. Like, I just love the bowling ball guys. And he's got the all-time 5'9". He cut to 214 for the combine for his testing, which was better than we thought it would be. But that's a kid that plays closer to 225. So it's just like a trash compactor, and he has the agility with the power. That's his game. Between the tackles, he's real good, breaks the tackles. He's going to get at least what's blocked for him and a bit more. Doesn't have the high end speed, but I think the thing that people sleep on with Taj Brooks, he's really good in the pass game. It's a guy who's very reliable. As far as catching, he has really good hands. And then this is something that, for fantasy players don't consider it as much. The NFL loves it. He is awesome in pass pro.
Yeah,
he's awesome in pass pro. He's one of the top 3 backs or so in this class in pass pro. So that's the thing that's going to keep him on the field on those passing downs. He also gives you the value as the receiver. Like I said, hard to tackle that guy in space, and then the meat and potato stuff. So I think he's going to be a sleeper for fantasy folks as well, because he's probably going to go in the 4th round. But it's for a team where it's going to be like, this is our short yardage dude, and this is going to be our passing down guy as well, for the reasons that I just stated. Well, if he's siphoning touchdowns while putting up the receptions because they can't take him off the field because he can block too, that's a guy who, even though maybe he's never at the top of a committee, that especially in deeper leagues, that he can begin to accrue value for you.
Yeah, one of the comps for the prospect guide. The 3 comps are Travion Williams, Ray Davis, Jeremy McNichols. Were the 3 for Taj Brooks. But what you're describing. What you're describing sounds like a Ray Davis type role and what we saw with Davis last year.
He reminds me so much of Zach Moss coming out of UConn.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yeah, it's the same thing where it's like the break in the tackles. You like the feet, that you got the power element. But it's like, man, I wish he was fast, but he's not, right? Like, so it's the one thing. But then Zach Moss also could help you in the pass game as well. But yeah, the Ray Davis one, I think that's a good one too.
Yeah. Let's move on to wide receiver. Is Tet McMillan? I mean, we've had a lot of Tet McMillan discussion this week with him having his pro day and slowly having his 40 time go from one of the fastest we've ever seen to one of the slowest we've ever seen. It's just, I tweeted about this earlier this week, but it's like a dude runs a 40 at his pro day, and as the day goes on, because I guess like, you know, maybe his like agent is like the one that puts it out there that it was fast or something. And then as the day goes on, everyone's like, oh no, scouts actually had it at here. Oh no, this scout had it. And it just gets slower and slower as the day goes on. But no one expected Tet McMillan to run fast. But is McMillan your wide receiver one? And is anyone close to Tet at that spot?
Yeah, well, first off, especially the pro day times there, it gets wonky because I don't know if people realize this, but every team, they time it individually. Right. And so and then typically it's the team where it's like the closest to the pro day is supposed to be like sort of in charge of what becomes the official time. And it like I said, it gets really wonky because that scout will compare his times with other scouts, and then at the end of it, like the thing that officially gets reported, you're trying to sort of ballpark it, but they have the discretion. It gets really just laser time the friggin' things. Okay, like, we have the technology. Like,
what are we doing here?
Yeah, just literally take a video of it and then have disseminate it and have the. But anyway, I digress. Put chips in the balls too, NFL. Like, come on.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I mean, regardless, all he had to do was hit it down the fairway. Tet's, he's not like an all-time. He's not Dante Thornton from this class. You know, he's not like a sprinter. But like his speed is adequate, and all you had to show was that his speed was adequate. I don't really care about that. I think Tet, if he can get his destiny, I think he would be a incredible wide receiver too, in a really good offense, as like the T. Higgins role. Right. Yeah. Like, but yeah, like, you know, between Drake London, I think those are the guys that he has some similarities to, and yeah, like, you know, somewhere between the 8th pick and, you know, 14th, 15th, 16th, somewhere in there is where I expect him to go.
Yeah, T was his top comp for me. I also had Cortland Sutton as one.
I see that. Oh, for sure.
He to me, like, because I know that people were like, he's either T or he's Drake London, and I kind of see it as like I don't think he's as good of a prospect as Drake London was. At least like what I see analytically too. London had just an unbelievable like age-adjusted profile at the end of the day. And also, you know, there's some competition things that won in his favor. But yeah, I mean, like, I think, you know, McMillan, I'll just move on to this next guy too, and then the next couple, because I think that seeing him within the context of the other guys, to me, he has fewer, at least analytical red flags, but I know there are some red flags about separation, etc. And, you know, his use of how his contested catch stuff is going to translate. We hear about this a lot, and sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does. It did, obviously, for a guy like Drake London, but is he currently your wide receiver one, Tet?
For sure, with the ball. Yeah, bell to bell, for sure.
Yeah, okay. So then let's talk about Matthew Golden. So Matthew Golden, I'm really, really interested in your perspective here, because you're someone who's watching college ball, who sees the journey of all of these guys, whereas I'm coming in January and being like, okay, people were hyping up Matthew Golden a little bit. Oh, he runs a fast 40. Now they're hyping him up even more. You know, I'm casually a college football watcher, so I know what happened, you know, with him at Texas and stuff. But it seems like he wasn't on the radar to this degree at all, maybe mid-season, at least from what I'm looking at in like mock drafts and stuff. I think just a few months ago, he was like a 5th rounder in some mock drafts. Like he was like, it just seems like his rise has come from nowhere. And so I want to ask you, is that the case? Like, am I completely wrong in seeing that? But also, is it warranted? Like, does this happen sometimes? And sometimes we're just right, and he should be a 1st rounder.
Yeah, to the first one from the treetops, yes. You know, in terms of the rise, and then the second one, is it warranted? Depending on the degree it goes to, I think it is. Yeah. If he, you know, wide receiver one is too far for me, but it is a down wide receiver class, and the profile that we have with that kid, the evaluation, you know, in my opinion, he has to be in the discussion with Burden and Egbuka. And if people have, you know, Harris, he has to be in that sort of second tier discussion. And if I'm not going to argue against anyone that puts him at the top of it. In fact, I'm considering it myself. This is an interesting discussion, as far as it being through the analytics paradigm. Yeah. You see, and both the film watchers as well, the nitpick he gets more from the film watchers, stuff like that, is like the lack of size and strength on the boundary. But for me, that was mitigated by the fact that the kid can win downfield on the boundary. It's the same reason that when people were during the process, remember Zay Flowers, during the process, people just wanted to make him a slot receiver. And I'm like, hello, watch his friggin' snaps at Boston College. He was beating people downfield on the boundary. Yeah. NFL corners, just, he can win downfield and he can play on the boundary. We've seen it. With Golden, it's the same thing where he can win on the boundary and he can win at all three levels of the field in the slot too, but on the boundary in particular. So I don't care as much about that. Obviously he has the juice to get downtown, but what I'm saying is he has the ball skills. He has the adjustments to the ball down there to make plays down the field. And then the analytic nitpick that he gets against him, it's the idea of I was talking about this with Dwayne. Dwayne and I, Dwayne McFarland, my colleague. We'll sometimes have, like on the what is it called? We have a thing with work where you can talk with your coworkers. So sometimes I'll just pop into his virtual office and we'll just, talk about some of these profiles for a little bit, because I'm curious, right? Like, and the thing with the on the analytics side, it's the idea that a guy with that career target rate, as low as it is, and then 2/3 of it being generated in the G5, that you look over the last 10, 20 years from an analytic perspective, it's like some of that stuff is not indicative of a first round pick. Yeah. Right. And so all that stuff I can see. And then, you think about the late rise and stuff like that. And I can see why some people, there might be a pushback and be like, this is fool's gold. But let me give you the context of that target share, because I think it's super important. This is a kid who was only in college for 3 years. 2 of those were in the G5. So that aspect of it is true. But he chose to stay home and go to Houston. He didn't have to. The school he was originally committed to was TCU. And there was plenty of other Power 5 suitors that were interested. He was a 4-star recruit coming out of Houston. But he decides to stay home and play at Houston. His true freshman season, which actually ended up being more than 1/3 of his profile because of the injury-ravaged sophomore year that I'll get to in a second. But the first year, he was a starter right away, along with another true freshman receiver in this class, Sam Brown. So those 2 guys were starters. The other starter on that team was a guy I like to call Tank Dell. Yeah. And it was his last season in college. And you know what Houston did every play? Tank. Tank had like 170 targets that year or something. Right. Yeah. It's like, but you're accruing all these snaps as Matthew Golden as a complimentary guy to a guy who you're going to build a friggin' statue to in front of your football. Tank Dell at Houston football, it's, whatever. Right. So you can't quibble with that. And that had nothing to do with Matthew Golden. He was a solid complimentary receiver for the true freshman that he was in that scenario. The next year, Tank Dell's gone. So now it's Golden and Sam Brown. But also gone were the quarterback, Clayton Tune, who got drafted, as well as the offensive coordinator, Shannon Dawson, who was the architect of the turnaround of Miami's offense. The pyrotechnic show they were doing with Cam Ward and all those guys last year, he was off to Miami the year before. So now those 2 guys are gone, and it's you and Sam Brown as the receivers. They picked wrong at quarterback. They started this Donovan Smith kid. He stinks. He's not a good thrower. Like, sorry, Donovan Smith, if you're watching this right now. But you had that going on. And then the other thing was Golden suffered an injury middle of the season, gets knocked out for that game, missed a couple games. He come back, he's not 100%. It basically ruined the second half of his season, which is why Sam Brown, he was going to be healthy the whole. So he established himself as the wide receiver 1 on that team. So that was the sophomore season. Well, then the junior season, and you're coming off that injury ravaged thing. It's why he wasn't as targeted as some of these other dudes in the portal. It was a tremendous amount of interest, but it wasn't like, for instance, the dude that Texas, their biggest target in the transfer portal for the wide receiver position, kid in this class, Isaiah Bond. Yeah. They go after Isaiah Bond because it's you are Xavier Worthy. That's what Sarkisian thought. We ain't gonna have any drop off at all. We're putting this kid in. He's gonna be Xavier Worthy. It turned out he wasn't Xavier Worthy, but it took a little while for Texas to get around to that. There's also some limitations with the quarterback there. I'm sorry if any Longhorn fans are listening. We got a lot of Quinn Ewers truthers amongst the Longhorns faithful. I don't know about that. He's not a great throwing down the field. And what we saw the last season was Quinn Ewers. I was almost going to swear. I'm sorry. A crap ton of targets went to the tight end. Gunnar Helm led the team, and then a bunch to the running backs as well, because it was all short and intermediate stuff. So you had, and then Bond was supposed to be the downfield guy earlier in the season. That's why it took a little bit for Golden. He's still starting, right? But the ideology of that offense, Golden proved it though, right? Yeah. And so down the stretch, and this is to the point, the rise for Golden, you don't see rise in the moment during the season, because we need more data, because small sample size, whatever. Sure. But down the stretch, boy, did he come on. Texas realized the number one, the wide receiver one alpha that we saw in the transfer portal just wasn't the one we thought. It wasn't Isaiah Bond, it was Matthew Golden. So as they played in the SEC title game, and then of course they go into the college football playoff. Now Golden is the wide receiver one, and he was eating. He destroyed Georgia in the SEC title game. He destroyed Arizona State. Unfortunately, we got a sliding doors thing in the next game, because people remember the TreVeyon Henderson 75-yard screen, catch and run, the delayed screen right before halftime that gave the momentum back to Ohio State. And that is viewed in hindsight as the thing that flipped that game. But what people forget is right before that, Mr. Matthew Golden suffered an injury. So he gets knocked out of that game against Ohio State. This was in the second quarter. So you had that on that end. Ohio State gets the ball back. We think they're going to run the clock out, and Henderson rips that thing off, does it all by himself. In the second half, Texas they didn't have Golden, and you had that sort of deflate thing, and they just didn't have enough. And Ohio State pull away in the second half. But yeah, Golden can play. The things I like about him, you have the versatility for slot and boundary. One of the better ones in this class. He interchangeable. He'll do either. He talked about that at his podium session, and I was doing because we've seen that at Houston, we've seen that at Texas. You can't call him a pure boundary, you can't call him a pure slot. He does both, and he'll do both for you in the game. So like a creative play caller, you want to take advantage of some mismatches. This is a dude who can play all over. So you have that. I mentioned before, he has proven that he can win at all three sectors. This is not a manufactured touch dude. It's a guy who can create his own opportunities, intermediate. Can also do it downfield. Do I think he's going to be a superstar in the NFL? Absolutely not. Do I think he's going to be an awesome wide receiver too? Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Do you have a comp for him?
My golden comp was, let me look it up real quick.
I'm curious because I didn't. It's tough to find a really good comp for him because of his size and his ability, like you said, to play inside out. You don't always get that combination, and the speed, obviously. The top one actually that got spit out, I don't think it's necessarily like this is the role he would play, but the top one actually that got spit out was Ladd McConkey in the model. So which was interesting to me, but it was
interesting.
But the thing that is that I would say is that at least McConkey, had that per route run stuff analytically, because Georgia just didn't use them the way that most wide receivers are using, just in terms of volume, right?
Yeah.
But his per route run numbers were incredible. But the model doesn't look at the per route run stuff; it's looking at other metrics, and that's why that was his closest match. But I'll be honest, like there weren't that many close matches with him, so I'm curious as to who your comp is for.
That's a good one, because I also like the aspect of that where McConkey interchangeable between boundary and slot, right? Yep. So you get that with him, and you see the benefits of that. You change between 12 personnel and 3 wide receivers, and you can move them all over the place as matchups dictate. So I'm gonna have to think about that one a little bit more. That's pretty good.
And McConkey was also faster than we expected at the combine.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, in terms of the athletic profile, and it's closer. Golden hasn't done some of the other ones, and the 4.29, it's funny how much discussion we've had about that, with people are Zapruder filming it, but like either way, like maybe it was just right on McConkey's time, right? Like if it was just a little bit accelerated as far as that. The Chris Olave one, I like with him because of the route running chops and that ability to go interchangeable between slot and boundary. But yeah, maybe I'll end up stealing yours with McConkey, honestly.
There we go. Yeah. There we go. I like it. I have to talk to you about Luther Burden. I know that we're over an hour right now, but I need to speak to you about Luther Burden because analytically, the model loves him. I even said at the top of the of his profile that if the Zap model had a baby, it might name it Luther because it likes what Luther Burden did his sophomore year. That's what it comes down to, right? Like the obvious contextual red flags are a lot of line of scrimmage usage, not a very robust alignment usage for him, a lot of slot work, a lot of like close to the line or down the field where there wasn't that much intermediate stuff with Burden. There's just a lot of these like question marks that aren't necessarily going to be captured in a age-adjusted receiving yards per team pass attempt breakout score, right? But at the same time, there is some stuff to like. I mean, like he was still good against zone, good against man, yards per out run. He does comp relatively well to like a guy like DJ Moore, and he's in that archetype of what's been working kind of well in today's game, which is sort of bulkier guys who can create a lot of yak. In that, and I'm not saying that this is the comp, but in that same like Malik Neighborsy type discussion of like build and what they could bring and the impact they can bring to an NFL team. I understand all the red flags, and I'm just curious where you're at with Burden, if that sort of vibes with you, and where you see like the ceiling and the floor with him.
Yeah, I got to see a lot of Luther Burden the last 3 years. As a 5-star recruit coming out of East St. Louis, which, by the way, folks, actually is not in Missouri. It's in Illinois. The more you know, NBC. But consider part of Missouri. He went to Missouri, stayed home, I guess, in terms of him. But he was starting right away for Missouri, and then the second season is when he detonated. There's some nitpicking about his first and his third year. Keep in mind, contextually, Missouri, their offense was not good the first and third year. In fact, both of those years, they threw for less than 3,000 total yards, as a team. The sophomore year was when their offense was good, and that's when they made the New Year's Six Bowl, and they beat Ohio State that season, whatever. And recently I went back and I watched Burden snaps again. That it's an interesting thing, the lengths that Missouri went to get him the ball. The manufactured touch thing, but this was like on sort of hilt, but it very, very creative. The different things that they would do with him. Yeah. Certainly the regular manufactured touch stuff when the defense did a drop zone, essentially automatically he was going to park 4 or 5 yards upfield, turn around. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was the play. They do the drop zone, Luther 4 yards upfield, turn around, and then it's running. After that thing, they shifted him around all the time. They love shifting around Luther because the defense is always, you start to confuse and scare them, and then they're going to tip off things. Are we in man? Are we in zone? When he would do the downfield stuff, it was almost always in scenarios where either it was if it was only one dude on his side, if it was Luther in the slot and then your boundary receiver, traditional sort of 3 wide receiver set. The only scenarios they throw to him downfield, it was when you had the single high safety and the concept to be the boundary receiver on that side. You're going across and you have to yank the safety to your left, basically trying to get Luther on literally one side of the field with his dude. And that's when you can toss it up to Luther Burden down the field. Like the downfield ball skills, I think it gets a little overblown, but like my take on it is that the ball tracking thing with him, it came and went. There was times he did it really, really good. And I like the body adjustments he makes when that tracking is true. Like he will make contortions and all of a sudden he opens up spacing and he's got good hands. Beneath a 5% drop rate his entire career. And he can make plays down the field. But he needs that opportunity, right? Yeah. So it's not a predominant downfield guy. Intermediate, creating space on his own, he doesn't really do it. Yeah. Right. Like it's these different machinations the team has gone to get him the ball. One of the other concepts they love to do, they do the diamond. Right. So it's the 3 receivers out there and he in the back. And then they would spray out, and sometimes 3, and they'd spray everyone else out to clear out, it's clear out routes. They're dummy clear out routes. And then everything they did with Luther Burden, it was designed to get Luther Burden on one side of the field against one dude or into a situation where you break one tackle, we got an explosive play. But another fun formation they love to do is 4 wide receiver set with Luther as the running back. So you have 5 running backs. But anyway, all these different things, just get him the ball. What I didn't see much of him was I just talked about the thing with the running backs and the running backs that can do it before and after the thing. Luther, he doesn't create a ton by himself before the ball has been there, and I wouldn't expect him to in the NFL. That's the bad news. The good news is he wanted the better people with that ball.
Right.
Yeah, and so basically the argument I'm trying to make is he ain't going to be a wide receiver one for you, because then it's going to be like the Missouri thing, and he ganged up on, and he can't create on his own. But he still could do a ton of damage in the NFL. JJ, we talked earlier about the context of the guys after the draft. Where did they land? This is a landing spot specific dude. You get him onto a team that needs a slot receiver that has fabulous boundary receivers that can win downfield. You force the defense to go double high safety the entire time, naturally creating that spacing in the intermediate. That's where he's going to eat. You can manufacture him the touches in that scenario. A perfect example of this team, they're not going to take him anymore. I don't think after yesterday, I believe, signed Rondale Moore because it would be superfluous skill sets. If they hadn't done that, Rondale Moore would have been perfect for the Vikings because you play next to Jefferson, you don't get more spacing in the NFL than playing next to Justin Jefferson. Of course, Addison on the other side, you have to pay attention to him. Then Hawkinson can win downfield too. And the running game is legitimate as well. So he's always going to be in scenarios where there is open space around him and you're going up against a non-elite cover guy most of the time, right? So that's where you can leverage his ability. But with the ball in his hands, Luther Burden looks like a star running back. He has that NOS button, shoots whatever, very, very sudden. And then it's one of those speed to power conversion things. He ain't strong in terms of if we're at the gym, lift it, not in terms of that, but that speed to power thing. He runs fearless and he generates that power. So all of a sudden he's got contact bounce. He's going to ricochet off the defensive backs coming at him from off angles. He'll keep chugging. So that's how he ends up breaking his tackles. I'm staying in Minneapolis for this one, but my player comp for him, who he reminds me so much of, Percy Harvin back in the day.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Yes. Again, you can nitpick him because it's like, the routes and all this. Right. Yes, I agree with you, but he is near the top of the line of continuum of that guy. Right. Yeah. And that's right around where Percy Harvin is. That's how I see him.
Yeah. And look, I think that Harvin, migraines and headaches aside, I think Harvin in today's game could dominate, could be a really, really, really impactful player. So I don't, if anyone hearing that, maybe they weren't even watching football then or what have you, but that's not a bad comp. That's not a bad player to be compared to at all. All right. I'll just give you one more question before we go. We've been talking about the higher end wide receivers, but is there any day 2 wide out in this class or maybe even day 3 who can make a serious impact in fantasy football? I've sort of, as I was doing all of the combine write-ups of the guys who went to the combine, I wasn't super thrilled about the potential day 3 wide receivers in terms of them making massive impacts. So I'm definitely curious if you have any there, but day 2 players, because there are some that I really, think could be interesting. I like Jalen Knoll a lot. He's a really, really intriguing guy, but I just want to hear what your thoughts are in the class, beyond this first and into second round.
Yeah, I love Nolan as well. That's a guy you're going to start for a decade. You're going to start right away, and then a decade plus in the slot. But since you mentioned him, how about I defer to his teammate for my day 2 guy? I love Higgins. Jaden Higgins, and he gets slept on, I think, because he came up from the FCS, and I think it's a little bit unfair. He tested as an elite athlete. At 6'4", 214 pounds, he had that 9.92 RAS and 99th percentile size adjusted. Now he hadn't done the agility stuff yet. I don't really care about that. He's got the speed. He has the explosion. The vertical is 39 inches. Very, very long arms as well. It's a broad-shouldered kid with a huge wingspan for a wide receiver. And he was tremendous in college, right? The past couple of years at Iowa State, they didn't have the greatest quarterback play in the world. Last year, Higgins, only 51.2% of the targets thrown to him were charted as catchable. And yet, JJ, you're a math guy, 130 targets, 87 receptions. This guy, he digs stuff out that is not considered catchable. He catches it outside of his frame. He can win at all 3 levels of the field. And he has the athletic profile of an alpha wide receiver one in the NFL. Now, do I think he can be that? No, but he's, Michael Wilson was a guy we saw down there a couple years ago, and there are some similarities there. It's just that Higgins is a way better athlete, right? Yeah. So, I think he gets slept on, and I think he's going to be a really, really good player for a long time. That's probably who I would toss out day 2. As far as day 3 sleepers, he's not going to have any. This is more for the NFL, but I suppose but Dante Thornton, it's because all that guy does is he's in the back of the batter's box, and every single time he swings for the fences, right? Yep. And in certain offenses, like who's the guy for the DFS people hate or love, Gabe Davis. Remember when it was just like, it's like that sort of thing where you're going to get but it's going to be dependent on the dingers. But that's what he does. Dante Thornton, almost 6'5", 205 pounds, and he has the 4.3 flat speed. So he's going to go on day 3 and then make someone happy. But how about we go deep sleeper? One of them that I like, Isaac Tesla from Arkansas.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Hillsdale College represent, man.
That's right. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I'm going electric, JJ, with Tesla. But a kid who came up late, and then he found himself in this weird and packed Arkansas wide receiver room last year where they had 4 or 5 guys that are going to get long looks from the NFL and were playing the NFL. And so they had this weird rotation. And then their quarterback is this physical freak, Taylon Green. He's like 6'6", and he has like 4.4 speed. Not a great thrower. And so you had this sort of rotation. And then when you get in, is not a great thrower. But Tesla can win down the field. And he's almost 6'4", 214 pounds, 992 RAS on him. For Tesla, and 4.43 speed. The agility was there with him too. He did all the tests, 4.05 shuttle, 6.85 3 cone. Those are both really good. 39.5 vertical. So, I mean, he's a tremendous athlete, and I like his game down the field. He can go up there and get it. He knows how to use his body. I comp him to Alec Pierce, where it's the downfield utility, I think, is what you're going to get in the NFL. And again, just because of the context of his situation and coming up, he told me when I talked to him at the Senior Bowl, and he said that I was the last invite here. Like, I mean, he's got a chip on his shoulder, and he was like, yeah, it was there because the usage at Arkansas. I mean, he knew what the deal was. Is he flying a little bit under the radar, but he looked good at the Senior Bowl. Those catches downfield and those one-on-ones, and then you go to the combine and you test as the athlete you did, he's going to get drafted. And I think, like I said, it's going to be an Alec Pierce type role for him once he sees the field of you're a field stretcher.
Yeah, he started at Hillsdale College, right? I had not had Hillsdale College in my database until Isaac Tesla came around. And I look at receiving yards per team pass attempt. Anything over like 3 is generally good. And obviously if a player, like we had Jalen Coker coming from Holy Cross last year, of course his numbers are going to be better because he's playing at Holy Cross. But Isaac Tesla at Hillsdale had a best season receiving yards per team pass attempt of 5.22 because he's playing against, just like lower tiered players. And then, you mentioned Dante Thornton. One of his comps for me in the model was Martavis Bryant as a high end one. Yeah. So we could see kind of that go down. And then let me ask you about Jaden Higgins. Do you see Nico Collins in his game?
Yes.
Like, is that the high end ceiling for him, you think?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that, that's more the Bonanza type, but I could absolutely see him being that. And people remember out there, Nico Collins, when he get drafted, second round. Right. I mean, he fell down to the second round. And then initially people, his first year, people were like, why'd they waste a second round pick on this bum? Nico, it was a different thing where like his passing offense in college, it just, the quarterback play wasn't as good and it wasn't as an advantageous type situation. And so that's why he ended up falling. He needed a little bit of time to develop. I think Higgins, I think he's going to be ready to hit the ground running a little bit quicker in the NFL. People got to stop sleeping on Higgins. I think Higgins, he deserves to be in that discussion with certainly Harris and Io Menor, in my opinion. I mean, like in this crappy receiver class, it's like, man, how many people are you putting above Higgins?
Yeah, no, I agree. It's also like if you're coming at it from a fantasy perspective, like shouldn't we be chasing ceiling a little bit here? And I think that his ceiling from a what he can bring to the table statistically is just as high as arguably anyone else in the class, in my opinion. Like if that high end actually hits, I like both Iowa State. I mean, I think they're both
for sure
just really like do you have a comp handy for Jalen Knoll? Because mine was the one the model spit out was Randall Cobb, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that's not a bad one. I got Khalil Shakir.
There you go.
Yeah, and maybe even like a little bit better version of Khalil Shakir. Yeah.
I love it. Thor, man, this was great. People are going to love it for sure. It was great to finally chop it up. I know that we went a little bit longer than typical, but I had to get out the burden takes and some of these wide receiver takes. But let everyone know what you're working on, where they can find you, all that good stuff.
Find me on Twitter at ThorKU, and then the NFL draft stuff you can find at Matthew Berry's Fantasy Life. We're going through all the positions right now. I think actually by tonight is when I turn in my top 25 receivers. They'll all have player comps. I think I'll write up 18, 20 of them. That will be stuff in there. And then, of course, we have mock drafts. And then a week before, 10 days before the draft, I'll be dropping my Thor 500 is always the big board with the 500 player comps. And JJ, awesome chopping it up with you for the first time. And I hope I see you in Canton because I need a ride coming back from that stadium.
Yeah, man, I got you. Yeah, no, your big board is absolutely like you're a madman. You're an absolute madman for putting that together. Everyone should definitely check it out. And also check out the prospect guide. You can find it over on lateround.com if you guys have not checked that out yet. Otherwise, as usual, thanks for tuning in.